Welcome, everybody. We're back with another episode of the Hubler Auto Group Coach's Corner. I'm your host, Thomas Crow, and with me today is my good friend, Brian Powers.
Thomas, how are we doing?
We're doing good.
Doing great, doing great. With us today, we have the new head basketball coach of the Franklin Community High School boys basketball team, 2007 graduate Adrian Moss. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thomas is leading the claps here. He knows where his PT's coming from. Well, first of all, congratulations on the new job. It's got to be very cool for you, just not only to be a head coach, and I saw in the press clippings or press release that you talked about being your alma mater. How cool is it for you to be able to come back here and be the head coach? Kind of a full circle type thing for you.
It's awesome. Like I said before, if I always wanted to be a head high school coach, and if there's anywhere that I wanted to be a high school coach, it would be Franklin. So starting back where you started at and where you kind of started building it at and seeing where it's at now, it's so exciting to dive back in and just, keep creating memories and provide opportunities for families and kids in this community and, hopefully be in a state championship one day.
So, obviously a great player in high school, 1,000-point scorer, a great player in college, and then even went into the pros over in Canada, correct? So, tell me just how your playing days have kind of affected the way you coach kids and train kids.
Well, I'm a point guard for one, and I'm a 5'8" point guard at that. 5'9" on the roster, but I'm really about 5'8". And so at that size and even at that position, first of all, at that position, you have to be a leader. You have to know what's going on. I'm not the 6'6" guy that just comes in and dunks and, plays off athleticism. I'm the guy that knows the scouting report. I'm the guy that knows all the plays. I'm the guy that communicates with the head coach and kind of extension of the head coach on the floor. So with that, I think the position prepared me, and I also think that my size, you have to do everything right. Your footwork has to be right. You have to work a little harder. Everything has to be correct to compete with guys that are at my position. Average size, I would say 6'2", 6'3", especially overseas. So you're dealing with premier athletes, and you're dealing with guys that are very, very talented and skilled. And with that being said, if you're a smaller guard, you have to do the little things, you have to do correct things, and you have to work probably harder than anybody else works. So those things, I think, translate to coaching very well.
When you come into a program like this, in a situation like this, what are you looking at? Like, what's the first thing you're looking at as a coach that you're saying, this is what I have to focus on?
I think for Franklin in particular, and I have a little insight because I played here and also coached here before, we got to get tougher. It's a 4A school, so we're competing against other 4A schools, and at the 4A level, it's really close to college basketball, and the tempo and the pace and the style of play, we have to kind of up that a little bit. So we have to get more aggressive and be a little tougher. We have to practice harder. And not saying that we're not already doing those things, but I'm going to come in and make sure that we are doing those things and just piggyback off of what Coach Dickey did before and just keep building on that. The program has had some success in the past, far back and even in the last 5 years. The last couple years have been a little rough, but when I was here, we were very good. We were very talented, and we were right there. So just coming in and trying to push over that hump and get a sectional championship, move on to regionals, and make some noise in the community and around the state.
So after your playing days kind of ended, you went to Decatur, and then Warren, Fishers, and now you're here. Tell me about how those previous experiences of coaching just kind of molded you into what you want to do now as a head coach.
I went to Franklin in between there too. Yeah, Decatur, Franklin. We already said that, but those experiences, it was everything for me, because everyone can say that they can step in and be a head coach and a high school coach, but what does that really look like as a coach? So me looking at it and saying, me coming straight from overseas and running a high school program, I think I would have did okay, but the details inside of it, I would have had to learn on the fly. And now being around Coach Ashworth at Decatur and being around Coach Weiniger at Warren and Fishers, I got to see not only what it looks like for a young coach with Coach Ashworth, but also for a brand new coach. So Coach Weiniger was a brand new coach at first-year head coach for himself and for the school. It's his first year. So what does that look like as a first-year coach, building a program, you know, diving into it, the things you have to do. And then we went on to Fishers and took over a whole new program, which was a completely different dynamic, a completely different area. So I got to see what it looked like in that space as well. So those 3 years with those guys will define me forever, and I'm thankful. They did nothing but put me in situations, be successful. They used me as a coach. I was responsible for a lot of different things, from scouting reports, player development, you know, almost like a head coach. I was right under the coach, and I was still coaching JV at the time. Most places, when you coach JV, you're kind of the JV coach and you got the varsity coach. Well, I coached JV, and then I was also the head assistant as well. So those two experiences, coaching my own team, but also being under someone and learning, was great.
When you talk about the little details there, what are some of the things that people probably don't know of that are those little details? And what are some of the things that surprised you most when you're like, oh, I didn't even realize we had to think about that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple dynamics there. There's on the court details and there's off the court details. So off the court, I would say like eating right. You know, like when you're a smaller guard, or some of my teammates, man, they eat McDonald's. I have a teammate named Darius Adams. He's making about $1.8 million in China right now. He was my teammate at UND, my backcourt mate. He'd eat McDonald's every day. He'd drink Cokes before practice. But if I did that, I would feel terrible.
Yeah.
I couldn't perform like I wanted to perform. So those things off the court, you know, putting in extra work, eating right, you know, making sure that you're overly prepared. And then on the court, things like pivot steps and using the travel rule to your advantage, and shot fakes and ball protection, things that other players can get away with if you're a little bit bigger. And so my thing as a smaller guard is taking those details and teaching them to guys that are that talented and are that big. And you teach those guys that are, you know, big and strong and athletic, and you teach those guys those details and you get them to buy into that, then it really, really changes their game. So those are the things that I pay attention to, especially as a trainer. It's helped me a lot because I'm actually training kids and paying attention to how do you score, how do you shoot, what's the best way to dribble, and then adding the coaching dynamic to that, I think is going to help out the program a lot.
So obviously, not just yourself, but your family as well is very involved in the Franklin community and the basketball community as well. So how was the decision to take kind of another basketball family in Franklin, being the Warners, and taking Ashley Jennings onto your staff as another part of the community?
That's what we want to do. We want to get former Franklin players. We want to get former Franklin athletes, former Franklin parents, guys in the community involved. We want all those guys who, if you got dads, brothers, sisters, moms out there that have been involved, have them reach out to me. We will get them involved in some way. We want those guys just coming in, checking out practice, and, you know, whether we're volunteering out in the community or we're doing a fundraiser, we want former players involved. So that is the goal with the coaching staff, to get former players involved. Probably every coach is not going to be a former player, but you will see a lot of players that put on the jersey before, whether it's girls or guys. You know, it doesn't matter to me. If you can coach, you can coach, and we're looking to get because they've been here before, right? They've been in these kids' shoes. They know what it takes to be a Franklin athlete. They know the community. So that's definitely was a goal for mine from day one. If I got this job, to get former athletes involved, and that's what we did with Ashley.
You haven't been a head coach before. So what's the one thing you're like, this is what I'm most nervous about, just being a head coach? That you're like, I don't want to say you're not, because you're obviously confident in your abilities, but you're just like, okay, that's going to be maybe tough to adjust to.
I think just as a young head coach, there's going to be things that come about that you haven't experienced before. There's going to be a lot of things that I have experienced, but there's going to be some things. Say I've been coaching for 25 years and been teaching for 25 years. There's probably not going to be a lot of things that you have not seen before. So I just think those new things. But to me, that's a challenge. Something new, tackling it and inviting it in and figuring it out is a challenge for me. I'm excited to be a head coach. It's always been a dream of mine. As an assistant, I probably wouldn't have been a very good assistant for the other coaches, other than the coaches that I coach for, because I'm opinionated. I've always had my own systems. I've always had my way that I wanted to do things. So it's time to put that in play, and I'm super excited.
So like Brian said, being a young coach, we've had very few practices so far, but if there was one guy who you could just have, NBA player, college basketball player, anything like that, where you could just have him on your team and would change the dynamic, who would you pick?
NBA player, anybody?
Anybody.
Kobe, 100%. Kobe mentality, and then after that it would be Steph Curry. Steph Curry because he's like me. He's not as athletic and as big as everyone else. So he has to use the details of the game to really be as good as he is. And then Kobe is because he's the hardest working player that I've ever seen. I was about to say been around, but I've never been around him, I wish. The hardest player that I've ever seen work, from the stories I've heard and the documentaries I've watched. His mentality, and then Steph Curry, the way he uses his what God gave him, he uses that to the max. So.
Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but you have just a potential all-state candidate on your team, just close to 1,000-point scorer in the career, just untapped potential there. Of course, I'm talking about Thomas Crow. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen Thomas play. If you have, maybe you can use some of these. But what does my man Thomas here have to do to get that potential untapped?
I've known Thomas for a long time. I've coached Thomas I don't think probably the first time was like 6th or 7th grade. Thomas is the type of kid you want in your program, and he just is. We're not even talking about talent, basketball, just the way
we are not.
We're
not talking about talent with that.
Thomas got talent too, but the way he carries himself, the way he approaches, just like this, he's very mature. The way he approaches the game, the way he approaches life, the way he approaches his teammates, his community are the type of guys that we want in our program. I've known that forever about Thomas, and we have a lot of other guys like that, but guys like Thomas and the other seniors are going to set the standard for our program. And they're going to be the guys that the other players look up and learn how to act. And that's what I can teach you the basketball stuff. I can teach you all that stuff, but I'm a little older now. I'm 32, and I'm going to get older, and you need guys that are in it, right? Guys that go to high school or in college that these kids can look up to, that our 5th and 6th graders can look up to and say, hey, that's who I want to be like. You see how he carries himself. You see how he is in the community. We want guys like Thomas. I've known Thomas for a long time, so I can say that with 100% confidence.
Well, Coach, the same as I am. I know you're excited to get going. Have the season, try and get a sectional, get a regional, go as high as we possibly can. So thanks for taking some time out and joining us.
I have one more question.
Oh, one more.
Okay. Before or after Game 6, will you get your first technical foul?
I've actually never had a technical foul ever in my coaching career.
But you've never been a head coach.
So I'm going to try to stay away from it. I really am.
I like it,
I'll
though. I'll
try to go my whole career without getting a technical foul.
Oh, that's...
We'll
don't do that. Don't do
that's
that.
my goal, but I know I was a ref myself. My dad was a ref, so my thing is to be able to communicate with the refs and get my point across without them feeling disrespected. And I think a lot of times when refs give you technical fouls, now that's not always a situation. Sometimes they're a little oversensitive and they take things the wrong way. But my goal is to communicate my side of things and put my team in the best position without the refs feeling disrespected. So we hope that never happens.
That's such a coach answer.
I don't have a prediction on that.
Why can't you just be like, sometimes the call was awful and I yelled at him and I told him he sucked. I got teed up.
He's been the head coach for 2 weeks and he's already got the head coach answer.
Yeah.
Another thing is we want to, I know this is I took a joke and made it serious, but I want to be an example for our kids. I don't want our kids looking at refs. If a kid looks at me in practice, because we're going to be coaching, we're going to be reffing. Coaches are going to be reffing in practice. And if a kid looks at one of my coaches or looks at me like, man, that was a foul, or I don't care if they got their head knocked off and they fell down on their back, I don't want you to look at a coach because you're going to do that same thing to a ref, and we're just not going to allow it. So I want to be an example of that, of kids not speaking at all to refs. Don't look at a ref unless it's handing them the ball and saying, yes, sir. I don't want that at all. So with me, I'm going to try to be that example of not overreacting to calls, because there's so much in a basketball game that I have to worry about and that my kids need to worry about. If we're over concerned with what the refs are doing every single game, it's taken away from what we're trying to do, trying to win a state championship. So I got to lead by example on that. So.
Yeah, and that
we
affects...
We don't care about refs here, Brian.
Good. That affects your team. I saw a game this year, Franklin versus some other team, and the other team, the other team's coach was just constantly on the officials. And as the game went on, he got more and more, and then the players started getting that way, and the players would come back to the huddle frustrated and mad at certain calls that were missed.
Right.
But that plays a part, and our coach did not, I don't think he said 10 words to the official the whole time, and that plays a role in it.
That's definitely something that I learned from Coach Dickey when I was here. I noticed that right away. He doesn't spend a lot of time with officials, and he gets a lot of calls. I mean, he does. I mean, he's very respected, and he's very under control on the sideline. So I want to coach with passion and with our kids, but I don't want that to trickle over to the referees.
Yeah, absolutely, Coach. Well, once again, thanks for joining us, and we wish you and myself luck going into the season.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, well, for Coach Adrian Moss, my co-host Brian Powers, I'm your host Thomas Crow, and this has been the Hubler Auto Group Coach's Corner.
Hubler is proud to be the official sponsor of Franklin Athletics. Score massive savings on all your favorite brands. Plus, get our 10-year, 200,000-mile warranty included. For all auto needs, just click drivehubler.com. Let's go, Grizzly Cubs!